Welcome to A Matter of Perspective. I'm Judge Derwin Webb, coming to you from the Fraser History Museum. I am pleased to have my guest today, the lead pastor of Northeast Christian Church, my church, Mr. Tyler McKenzie. Mr. McKenzie, welcome to the show. Or should I call you Pastor McKenzie? How do you want me to call you?
You just call me Tyler, Your Honor.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing really, really well.
Man,
to be here, man.
Well, I appreciate you coming on today because we are going to go through a lot of different topics, a lot of different things that we want to talk about. You and I have been knowing each other for a long time, and I will tell you this, before we get started, let's just be honest. When you came as the pastor, I didn't know how to take you because I had a great relationship with the former pastor, Bob Cherry, and I didn't want to like you like I like him. But I've gotten a chance to know who you are and know what you stand for more than anything, and I appreciate what you do, not only for the church but for this community. But how did you get to Louisville? Talk about how you got here.
Well, when I took the role at Northeast, I was 25. I think I was 25 years old. So I didn't know how to take me. It was my first ministry job, so I'm really surprised actually they hired me. So little background, grew up in a preacher's house.
So you're a PK.
I'm a PK, which pretty much guaranteed in high school and in college. I had some rebellious years. When I graduated high school, I was certain that I was not going into the ministry like my dad. Even though all the ladies at church would pinch my cheek and say, "You're going to be just like Preacher Bill." No, that just guaranteed. I'm going to prove you wrong. Okay. But long story short, ended up in the ministry through a lot of, I would call just divine circumstances. And so when I was getting to the end of seminary, I had to find my first ministry job. And Northeast's opening came up. They were looking for a teaching pastor, large church here in Louisville, and they were hoping that teaching pastor could fill the leadership role of the founding pastor, Bob Cherry, who'd been there for 35, 40 years at that point in a transition. So I thought, there's no way they're going to hire me. But one of my mentors in Cincinnati told me that I should apply for the job anyways. They're like, just for the sake of experience, apply for the job. Maybe you'll get a couple interviews. It'll be good for you. So I applied, and one interview led to two, led to three, led to four. Before you know it, we got the job. And I always pick on the board at our church because I'm like, you can't tell me that I was the right guy for the job. I didn't have nothing for you guys. I didn't have experience. I had one sermon tape to give them.
Must have been a heck of a sermon tape.
Yeah, I guess so. I can't remember what it was. Some of them I probably preaching a podunk Christian church, as I was cutting my teeth learning how to preach and stuff. So anyways, but one event led to the other, and there it was. So, and it's been the greatest blessing ever because we've found some of our closest friends. We've landed in this city that me and my wife and the kids call our home. We've had all of our kids here in this city. And we're going to be here until the day we die unless God plucks us and moves us out of Louisville. Right. We love the Ville, man.
Let's talk about something before you got here. You were a student athlete. And you were a baseball player. It's my understanding that you may have a record or two, NCAA record here and there. But
how did I know you bring that up?
let's talk about your baseball career. You were a baseball player. Tell me about your experience as a student athlete.
Yeah, so I played all sports growing up, which is something my kids don't do anymore, by the way. They don't do the kind of cross-training where you play 2 or 3 or 4 just different season, different sport.
Right.
I came from a generation where me and all my buddies did that. We went from soccer or football to basketball to baseball. I
did the same thing.
Yeah, I played them all, and I loved them all. But when it got to the end of my high school career, it became pretty clear that baseball was the one that I was getting offers to go play. And so had a lot of mid-major Division I offers, none of the big ACC schools. I was living in North Carolina, so nothing like that. So what I ended up deciding to do was I went to a premier Division II school that could compete for World Series championships. Belmont Abbey College is in Charlotte, North Carolina. Went there and played for 4 years, and it was a great experience. We went to a College World Series my senior year, came in third, sadly. So now I'm living vicariously through U of L. I'm hoping Coach Mack takes him to Omaha and brings home a trophy to the Ville sometime soon. But I'll tell you this about being a student athlete. I think that if your kid shows even the propensity, the smallest propensity towards sports, you need to get them in team sports.
And why's that?
It's life lessons, man. It is life lessons learned. You learn how to win. You learn how to lose. You learn how to work together on a team. You learn how to have constructive conflict. You learn how to perform under pressure. These are all things that when you learn at a young age, You take them into school with you. You take them into the workforce with you. You learn, okay, here's a good one. Diversity is a hot topic, obviously, right now for all the right reasons. And you learn how to connect with people cross-culture. You want to find a way to put your white son around black and brown young men as well. Put them in sports. I realize now, reflecting on a lot of stuff that's going on right now in our country, that was one of the greatest blessings for me. Some of my closest friends in life were black and brown young men who played ball with me. I remember in college, half of our team were Latino guys. And so you know what happens in there? Not only do you form this brotherhood because you're competing together, but there is just, you spend so much time, me play college sport, you spend so much time with your team that there is just this melding of culture. There's no color blindness. You get to know your boys, your shortstop, your second baseman, your pitcher's culture. So we had several Cuban dudes on the team. We were eating Cuban food. I learned Cuban slang, which I probably can't repeat on here now that I'm a pastor. You know, I learned music. I learned and they learned my culture. I take them fishing. So it was a pretty beautiful thing. And in fact, I was thinking about it this morning with some of the stuff going on in the NBA and just thinking back to my time as an athlete. We say all the time in church, the ground's level at the foot of the cross. Ground's also level in the locker room. It's crazy how that brings people from all different cultural contexts together. So anyways, long story short, I would tell anybody, if your kid even has the propensity towards playing team sports, get them in team sports, let them play it as long as they will, because it teaches them a lot of valuable life lessons.
I would tell you that someone once told me that college is a microcosm of life. I'll take that out and say sports is a microcosm of life. True. Because every facet of life, everything that you have to deal with, you deal with as an athlete. And all the lessons that you've learned and that you just talked about, you learn being an athlete. And the earlier you learn those lessons, probably the better off you're going to be as well.
No doubt. You know, one of my best lessons as an athlete, and you learn this too, man, is how to take constructive criticism. One of the things I want in my staff at church is I want them to be coachable, right? I want them to be able to take feedback, apply it to what they're doing, and become better because of it. And you don't have a choice to do that when you're an athlete, because your coach is going to come out and they're going to give you a piece of their mind. Depending on what kind of coach they have, they might grab you by the collar, or they might gently do, but you're seeing a little less grabbing by the collar now these days. But you got to learn how to take constructive feedback. I can tell sometimes. I can tell sometimes who some of my people are who played sports growing up, because they have a propensity to receive feedback.
Well, who's your favorite coach? Just off the top of your head, who's your favorite coach and why?
Baseball coach?
It doesn't matter.
Coach Mack, man.
Okay, tell me why.
Coach Dan McDonald. I think that Dan. Now you're going to get to the pastor side of me.
Okay.
I think when Dan steps into his job, he sees the larger mission of it. No doubt about it, he wants to win ball games, and he has. And nobody won as many baseball games in college baseball as him the last decade. Yeah, we have all seen the statistics, right? But the cool thing about him is that he realizes that some of these young men are going to go off and they're going to sign multi-million-dollar signing bonuses and play in the show. Some of them aren't. Some of them are going to go into the workforce. Some of them are going to be in finance. Some of them are going to become coaches. Some of them are going to join my staff at Northeast. I got one of his players on my staff right now. And he's sending these young men out into the world. And so I think he and his staff have this vision, not just to raise up great baseball players and win games, but to raise up young men. And honestly, in a job like his, and you got a job like this too. I got a job like this. In a job that requires so much of you, if you don't have a deep-seated mission, like purpose, that goes beyond just dollar signs or just goes beyond statistics on a sheet of paper, that actually looks into the investment and the deposit that you're putting in people's lives to change it for the better, then it's going to burn you out. So I love his bigger vision for how I'm raising up people. I'm not just winning ball games.
Well, let me ask you this question. Now, you transitioned from being an athlete and you go into seminary. Talk about your time as a seminary student and where you thought you would be as you began your ministry through seminary.
Yeah. So, the way I got into ministry is kind of a weird story. So I went to Belmont Abbey to play college baseball. Had absolutely no intention of going into the ministry. I was going to become a lawyer. because I took a practice LSAT, did really well on it. I was like, okay, if I'm good at it, let's do it. But I was about halfway through my freshman year. So college baseball is a little bit weird because you got like 60 plus game schedules, right? So that means every other day you're playing and you're traveling. So you just live life on buses and hotels in the locker room. And for college baseball, every single weekend you play. And your biggest games of the season are your weekend series. So there was never a Sunday morning that I was in church my freshman year. And it started to wear on me spiritually. I spiritually just kind of bottomed out, making a lot of stupid college boy decisions. And so I remember about halfway through my freshman year, I had this moment where I was like, you got to change. I would say it was God telling me, Tyler, you know better, and I have better for you, so you got to change. So I went to my coach, and I told him, I was like, I quit.
You quit?
Quitting the team. And my coach was a little caught off guard by it because I was his leadoff hitter and center fielder at the time. And so I don't know how Christian he was at this point, but he said, okay, before you quit and go off to some Christian school or something and try to fix your faith, why don't you try starting a church service for our team? Your dad's a preacher, right? You know how to do these things. And so I was like, fine, I'll do that. So I'll give it a try. And so we started getting up about 6 a.m., 7 a.m. on Sunday mornings before we do team breakfast and get ready for the games, and I started hosting a church service. And I remember the first one, it was me, one of our pitchers, and my head coach. And I think he just came just so I wouldn't quit. But 3 turned to 5, 5 turned to 8, 8 turned to 10. Before you knew it, most of the team and the coaching staff was coming to these little church services. And they weren't good, by the way. They weren't good church services. I didn't know what I was doing at that point. We would come together. I would read out of a devotional Bible. We would take a little to-go communion. Like we had little to-go communion kits that my dad gave me that they would use to take to shut-ins at the church. We would take to-go communion, and then we would pray for each other. And everybody had to hug before we went to the ball field that day, which hugging is a thing. You know, like not anymore, but hugging was once a thing. You used to be able to hug. Those were great times. But anyways, we'd hug. And I remember I came back my sophomore year, and some other athletes from other teams in the athletic department were like, hey, we heard what you're doing with the baseball team. Will you do that for the whole athletic department? And before you know it, I was leading a sizable campus ministry at my school that was unofficial, just sort of organic groundswell. And I felt like it was God telling me, I've gifted you and I'm calling you to do this. So when I went into seminary, I didn't come with some sort of Bible college degree or anything. I just came with a degree in baseball and hard knocks, just figuring out how to do ministry on the ground with some of my college friends. So I had a real passion for college students. When I went to seminary, I thought I was going to do college ministry, but God led me to preaching. I remember when I got on campus, there was an older gentleman, established preacher in Kentucky, who came to me and said, hey, you need to preach. I've heard of you. You need to preach. And so he started sending me out to all these smaller country churches that needed supply preachers every week. I remember the first church that I really had a long-term assignment at, about 6 months, was Augusta Christian Church in Augusta, Kentucky. Go down to AA, you see Augusta. Don't blink, though. That's what the Clooneys have a house there. That's what I always see every time I went. Did you know that the Clooneys lived over there? I'm like, I know, you told me last week, man. But there's about 15, 20 people, beautiful people at that church. I remember one of their elders who would do the announcements every week was a trucker. So he'd get up, he'd take his trucker hat off, and he'd have this big chaw in his mouth, man. While he's doing the announcements, he had this big chaw in his mouth. Welcome to Augusta Christian. His name was Ronald. Good dude. But I learned how to preach there. Preach some bad sermons at churches like that, and then and they still loved me anyways and supported me, and that's where I kind of gained my real love and fire for preaching.
So you make that transition from being in seminary and you make your way to Northeast Christian. Tell me about your first time in Louisville with Northeast Christian. What were your experiences like?
Well, it was about a 3.5-year process that led from me arriving to Louisville to taking the baton from Bob Cherry. And you...
Now, were you in Florida at one point? Okay, I'm sorry.
This is North Carolina.
North Carolina.
Charlotte, North Carolina is where I went to college, and Cincinnati is where I went to seminary.
Okay, I saw a video, I believe, of you and your wife at the time before you came here.
We were in Cincinnati. I remember that.
That was in Cincinnati? Okay,
yeah.
Okay.
You were probably one of the 700 people who emailed us. Bob, whenever we took the job, he played that video for the church of us introducing ourselves in Cincinnati. And I didn't know he was going to do this, but he put my personal email on the video. and he encouraged everyone in the church to email us and welcome us to church. Well, for those who are listening that don't know, Northeast has thousands of people in the church. So my email inbox was just
lighting up.
I slammed the next day, which was a beautiful thing to receive that welcome. But when I came into ministry, I had no experience. I was straight out of seminary, 25 years old, so I thought I knew everything. Mm-hmm. I just learned Greek, so now I know how to read the New Testament in the Greek, and I know all these theories, and I'm young and idealistic, and so I've got it all figured out. And this would probably be my first encouragement to young people out there who are just now entering the workforce. Don't lose your energy and your idealism, but don't lose sight of the fact that the people who have been there for years cutting their teeth know more about it than you did. Because I came in and I thought the first day on the job that I was ready to take Bob's job. I could take this job. I'd probably do better than him, because you got a little ego, right? 3.5 years later, when he handed the baton off to me, I was certain that I was not ready to take the job. So it's just one of those things. It's a learning process, man. I learned a ton, and it humbled me fast.
Well, how is it having to take over from a person that actually has founded a church? It's not like you came into a situation where there were 30 or 40 members and they decide that their lead pastor was retiring, so we're going to bring you on, these 30 or 40 people. Not necessarily, I wouldn't necessarily call Northeast a mega church, but for lack of better words, it's a pretty big church. Yeah. So how did you handle that, carrying the baton from that point? How tough was it for you? Because I can only imagine the challenges that you had to take on.
I'll say two things about transitioning behind such a beloved and accomplished leader that I learned quick.
That's still alive and still around.
And still mentoring and attending our church and a part of it. So first is that I had to just go ahead and acknowledge that I was not him. I was not Bob Cherry. Everybody's like, he's got big shoes to fill. And I was like, I know. So please don't ask me to fill those. Mm-hmm. Or else I will be living in his shadow for the rest of my life. Mm-hmm. And so I had a really gracious church that said, no, God's made Tyler to be Tyler. You're part of it. And so I was just really encouraged, you gotta be you. Don't try to be Bob. Don't try to do what Bob did. There was enough DNA and vision alignment already between he and I where it wasn't like we were completely reinventing the church. Mm-hmm. But we both have very different personalities. You figure that out, you hang out with us for about 2 seconds. So I could not try to fill his shoes. If I did, I'd be living in his shadow forever. Mm-hmm. The second thing I learned really quickly is that changing culture in a larger organization, which Northeast is a big church. Again, like you said, thousands of folks there. It's not like, it's more like turning a battleship than a jet ski, right? We need a jet ski, and you can turn and go the other way. When you're on a battleship, it just takes time to change culture. And so there were things about the culture that I wanted to see different, or new initiatives that I wanted to create, like our Love the Ville initiative that I'm so passionate about. And I just realized, you just can't come and rip the Band-Aid off, or you can't come introduce a new idea and expect everyone to jump on board from the first day. It takes time. You got to beat the drum, right?
Well, let me ask you this: how is it running a church in the midst of a pandemic? In 30 words or less. No, I'm just joking. I'm just joking when I say
Throw out the playbook.
I know I watch you every week. I watch the sermons. But how is it for you, being the lead pastor, having to run this large church in the middle of a pandemic and doing everything through virtual now? So talk about that a little bit.
First, I would say that we don't like it. Our pastors do not like it because we love our people. Mm-hmm. And so we want to be with them. And this has created a barrier from us being with our people. So we don't love that, and I can't wait until some sense of normalcy. There's going to be a new normal, mm-hmm. but some sense of normalcy returns. I would say that for sure. Here's what I told our staff from the start. I said, look, y'all, the methods change. The mission doesn't. Doesn't matter if there's a pandemic or not. Doesn't matter if we can meet in person with 3,000 people. Doesn't matter if people are meeting at home with 7 people with masks on. Doesn't matter if we meet outdoors. Doesn't matter if we meet in a building. Doesn't matter if we meet on a Zoom call, and everybody has had enough of Zoom calls at this point, right?
Absolutely.
We are all Zoomed out, but it doesn't matter. Methods change, mission doesn't. You guys know what we're about here. We're about creating people who live the love of a lifestyle for Jesus, who unleash Jesus' love every day, everybody, everywhere. So we're throwing the playbook out, but the good news is that we have a unchanging mission to build off of. So we're going to have to be creative. We're going to have to be flexible. We're going to have to be resilient. We get to be the cutting edge right now of doing something. Let's get excited about that, and let's figure out ways to minister in this season. You know, here's what I found, man. I found that this has been it's been a hard season. Global pandemic, economic recession, racial unrest. It's been hard, but it's been a fruitful season of ministry for us because we've taken this opportunistic outlook. When people are hurting, that's when they need faith more than ever. Okay, when folks come up against hard times, they either do one of two things. They either walk away from their faith altogether, which I would say is a big mistake, because faith actually gives you the spiritual, emotional, truth resources to get through hard times. But they either walk away altogether or they lean into it. And so we've had this opportunity with people leaning in. Folks who have walked away from the church leaning in again. Folks who are a part of our church who all of a sudden have to take ownership of their own faith like never before because they don't got us anymore. They can't come on Sundays anymore. All of a sudden they are realizing the thing that we say all the time at church, and that is church is bigger than an hour. Church isn't a building. It's a place. It's a people. And all of a sudden they're realizing, yeah, it's got to be bigger than a building now because I've got no building to go to. So it's been a disorienting season, to say the least, but it's also been a fruitful season where we feel like we are still seeing a lot of folks draw closer to Jesus and do the sort of things that he wants them to do. It's certainly given our church a lot of opportunities to show love to our neighbors.
We'll talk about some of those opportunities. I see you wearing the T-shirt. Now you
Always wearing a T-shirt.
Now, I see the T-shirt also. I see, see the arms, I see the guns.
Here we go.
See, I decided to wear my jacket today because I didn't want to have to compete against what you're wearing today. But let's talk about what's on your shirt. Let's talk about Love the Ville. Tell me about the initiative that you have so much passion for.
Yeah. So one of the big hallmarks of I feel like our church now is that we want to earn for ourselves a reputation in the city as the Love the Ville Church. The reason why I say that is because I'm under the belief that when people hear the word church, especially those outside the church, they usually think of something, and it's usually not good. It's definitely not Jesus' love. And so if there is anything that our church is known for in this city, first and foremost, then I want it to be self-sacrificial neighbor love of Jesus. And so we invest a tremendous amount of our financial and our sweat equity resources into that. We have been for 4 or 5 years. We have 11 intimate school partners, several local community partners serving Matthew 25, the least of these, if you will, in our city. We have global outreach partners that are just involved in lifting up the oppressed, the marginalized, the poor, the hungry, and making our community a better place. So when this pandemic hit, it was interesting. Our church was in a way ready for it because we already had all these relationships built up in the community where we were serving folks. And all we had to do was take the systems that we had already built and turn it up. So like our church shut down in theory, right? But what we did was we took our church building and we turned it into a food pantry. You remember this. So we were like, hey, we've been talking with all of our partners who are serving all across our city. The number one need we're hearing right now at the beginning of this pandemic is food insecurity. People, they can't get to the groceries, like they can't. So folks don't want to go out. So we need food and we need to deliver food. And just like that, we turned our church into a food pantry. We collected over a couple 100,000 items of food, and we were able to get folks to take it out in safe ways. And for a couple months, we fed the Ville. On top of that, other opportunities came up for us to serve different populations, different families, different demographics that needed help, from healthcare workers to individual families in our church who needed help to small business owners. We created a small business mentoring program because a lot of small businesses have been struggling through this time, and we were able to connect them with entrepreneurs entrepreneurs in our church that are super savvy and seasoned. They're able to coach them through it. We even came up with a kingdom justice plan in order to support black pastors who are serving in predominantly black communities, and some of our schools, our public school partners that are serving predominantly black populations, and just say, hey, we want to show you that we got your back during this season because you're doing important work. So, yeah, like that's what our church is about. We want to be known for that because we feel like there's something attractive, irresistible, and honorable about that.
Let me ask you this. Now, obviously, you're the pastor. You are over a huge ministry. A lot of people come to you to ask a lot of different things. How do you manage to do all the things that you do and still make time for your family? Now, I understand that you just had a new child.
Yeah.
And this is your third. You're dad, pastor, teacher, but your dad. How do you be dad with all this other stuff going on?
So this is what I would tell any follower of Jesus listening to this right now, and I would even challenge folks who aren't Christians, because I know that's part of your audience too. This is my mindset. I have 3 ministries. One of them is the ministry of being the lead pastor at Northeast Christian Church, my job. But I also tell everybody I got a ministry as Lindsay's husband, and I raised my hand and volunteered for that one. And I got a ministry as Palmer, Larkin, and Olson's father. Mm-hmm. And all 3 of those ministries are important. They're all things that God has called me to. They're all things that I love deeply. They're all ways that I can make a difference in the world for Jesus. And so I hold all of those at a high importance. And so what I do is I pray daily for wisdom on how to make sure that I am balancing those and investing in those. You know, so there are times when, like right now, when I cut my work schedule back 50% during the middle of a pandemic, when we're probably going to be opening up church again soon for the first time. Mm-hmm. I shouldn't be away from work, but I cut my work schedule in half because I just had a 3rd kid. And I knew my wife needed me at home and my kids need me at home. But then there are times where I tell my kids, hey, you're not going to see dad for the next day or 2 because God's got me out here doing this and serving our community in this way. By the way, that's one thing that I always want my kids to know. I want them to know that I'm not leaving the house and spending all this time at work in order to just make a buck. I think a lot of parents say that, hey, I got to pay the bills, and so that's why I'm going to work. I don't want them to ever connect me leaving them with money, because I don't want them to see dad leaves me for money. I want them to see dad has to leave the house for mission. Mm-hmm. God's called him to a mission. He's going to have a mission he calls me to someday. I respect that about Dad. He takes his mission seriously. So there are times when I got to roll out the house, though, and I got to do. So anyways, it's a balancing act for sure, but I do take a 3 ministry approach or a 3 commitment approach, and all of those commitments are important, and they all deserve the best of me. And by the way, I can't give 100% everywhere. That whole coaching, give 150%. You only got 100%, man. I only got 100% to give, so I got to make sure that I'm being wise about how I dole that out.
I heard someone say one time that words matter. One of the things I can honestly say about you is that you are true to your word, and your words do matter. Let's transition to talk about something that I think is very important to you, and something you and I have talked about a lot. It's about social justice. We alluded earlier about us being in the middle of a pandemic. We've had an economic crisis, but we also have a racial unrest. And one of the things you've talked about in church a lot is the church's commitment and church's what's the word I'm looking for? The church having
responsibility.
Exactly, the church's responsibility to do things as far as social justice is concerned. What do you see social justice being in Louisville right now, especially in Louisville, where we have a pretty big issue going on right now nationally, and it's all focused on here. So what do you think we are right now?
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, I would say this: Black people deserve better. They do. They deserve better. And that's what's at the heart of the cry for justice that we hear in our country right now. So when it comes to justice, I think it is an absolutely essential value for Christians, and it's an essential value for Americans. Now, it's something that America's still trying to work out, obviously. Mm-hmm. We've come a long way. You hear people say, we got a long ways to go still, though, right? So it's something that's being worked out in our country right now, but it should be an essential value for both the American and the Christian. I'll give you a baseline definition for justice first. When I say justice, what I mean, plain and simple, is people getting what they deserve. That's what justice is. You give people what they deserve. Now, a lot of times when folks hear the word justice, particularly white folks, sometimes folks in our church, our ministry, they think about that in terms of criminality. Criminals need to get what they deserve. They deserve just punishment, if you will. But there's another side of justice, and that's the victim side. Victims should get what they deserve as well, which is fair treatment. And we know that for decades, centuries now, black populations in America have been victimized. And so when we hear our black neighbors and brothers and sisters crying out for justice, what they're crying out for. They're saying, hey man, we just want to know that our lives matter too, you know? Now, to take that one step further, for the Christian, I think that justice doesn't just simply mean giving people what they deserve. I think that means giving people what Jesus says they deserve. And the scriptures are pretty clear about that. Scriptures say that everybody deserves our honor and respect because they're created in God's image. Scriptures say that everybody deserves our love because Jesus died for them. Everybody, by the way, even your enemies. What is the cross if it wasn't Jesus dying for his enemies? So even your enemies, even the cultural other, even somebody who's on the other side of the political aisle from you, they deserve your love. Which, by the way, it's worth saying that's a unique thing that Christians should bring to politics. Right now you hear social justice getting politicized a lot.
Right.
Like it's a right-left issue. Christians should bring to politics the truth that all human lives have value because they're created in the image of God. Even enemy lives, right? Even the lives of the other, my political other, my racial other, my cultural other, even UK fans, even U of L, right? We should bring that though into the conversation. Right now, you don't hear that. In fact, I think it's like a political strategy for anybody who wants to run for national office, where you have to scorn the other side. You have to go after them. Part of that is because that's what excites the base, right? They hate the other side so much they want to hear they're a politician. Take them down. You heard recently. Okay, it's not recently. Throughout the first administration of 45, President Trump, him and a lot of his compatriots will attack and shame and bully anyone who comes up against them. Their policies, anyone, even folks who are within their administration, if they come against them, boom, they get nailed, right? And they'll do them in pretty nasty terms. On the flip side, though, recently I saw President Trump's brother died, Robert Trump, and there was this hashtag going on Twitter that was a hashtag wrong Trump. And how vile is that?
Right.
You know?
Right.
So there's just all this dissension, all this just downright hatred in the political sphere. And I think that something that Christians can uniquely bring into the political sphere is that idea that all human beings have dignity. I'm going to talk that way. I'm going to treat them that way. We can disagree, and we can disagree vehemently. But it doesn't matter how they treat me. I'm going to treat them the way that Jesus treated me. And that's not something I see, but it's something we can bring to this issue of social justice. Anyways, long story short, I would say that justice is giving people what they deserve. Christians need to give people what Jesus says they deserve. And he's pretty clear on that.
Are you hopeful?
Hopeful for what?
Something better.
I am hopeful for something better. Okay,
because let's just be honest. The climate's tough right now. You have people on one side that feels it needs to be a certain way. They have another group that feels that something needs to happen the way they see it. It's just hard to try and figure out what's the best way to make things better for people. So are you hopeful that things are going to get better based upon the climate that we have right now?
So here's the tension that I live in, because I want to be a part of the solution, right? I really do. The tension that I'm living in right now is, one, I want to honor the words of Dr. King in his I Have a Dream speech and never take the toxic tranquilizer of gradualism and just tell my black brothers and sisters, well, just be patient. I want change now. But on the flip side, what history has proven to us, and really the way that our governmental system is set up, change is it just doesn't happen fast. There are moments and times where we see change happen really, really, but that's not the norm. The norm is that you have to keep plotting, you have to remain faithful, you got to continue to build the relationships, you got to continue to organize, you got to continue to say the right things, do the right things, act the right way, and over time change will happen. So there's this tension between we got to be in this for the long haul if we want to see real change. But then there's also this tension, I don't want to wait for that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say this. I think that's, we were talking about before when we were off camera, we were talking about the NBA. I'm not even sure when this is going to go live. But we were talking about the NBA and how recently the Milwaukee Bucks boycotted their games, and then one game after the other, you see a whole day of games fall out. I'm not even sure how that's going to play out. They're saying that the season's not going to be, or the playoffs are not going to be completely canceled. They're going to resume play, but who knows how that plays out. But what you're hearing these players say, these athletes say through their platform, is that they want change now. They want change right now.
Right.
And that's a very American thing to do, by the way, is to protest, especially with in a nonviolent way. People getting mad about. So it started with Cap 4 years ago when he kneeled, and now the NBA players are protesting. And this, I mean, you may not agree with Cap kneeling during the national anthem, or you may be mad because you think these athletes are overblowing the issue or something like that, or not looking at it from the other side of this perspective. That's fine. You can be mad. But protest is very American. Like, we started with the protest.
That's what I was going to say. We started with the American Revolution. That was not necessarily a peaceful discussion between our country and another country. There was a revolution that made us who we are today.
Yeah, I mean, major advancements have happened because of protest. Okay, so here's a good one for the Christians out there. If you are not Catholic, then you are a Protestant. Think about that. A Protestant. Where did all the Protestant denominations come from? Mm-hmm. Well, it came from when in the 16th century they protested against some of the corruption that they saw in the Catholic Church. By the way, I love the Catholic Church, but that's just the reality of history. It was a protest. So protest is a good thing. It's a Christian thing. It's an American thing, and I am happy that these guys are using their platform in a way that exacts change, and I really do hope that it continues to move the needle forward. You know what we're going to see, though? We're going to see, and I'm going to go preacher on you for a second, that we're going to see the idolatry of sports come out over the next few days.
Absolutely.
We're going to see people push because they love their sports. I mean, you saw how crazy people got when sports got canceled through COVID-19 here, and you'll see some stuff in the next few days, I'll tell you.
Let me ask you this. I'm going to try and wrap it up. I know we've gone a few minutes, and we need to wrap it up. Let me ask you this. You've been at Northeast for a while. People know who you are. Mm-hmm. If people were to talk about you, how would you want them to describe you?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, the easy thing is I want them to say that guy takes. Okay, this is what I want to say. He doesn't take himself seriously, but he takes Jesus seriously. Doesn't take himself too seriously, but he takes Jesus seriously. Good-natured, humbled, knows he don't have it all figured out, but the man that he says actually rose from the dead, and the man who he says love actually conquers evils like systemic racism that we were just talking about, and all other evil out there. He takes him seriously, and he tries to live his creed in his way, which is self-sacrificial love. That's what I want him to say. I want him to say he loves the Ville. Like if I died in Louisville tomorrow, I would want, or the 40 years from now, if somebody's doing my funeral, I'd want him to say, man, that dude made a big impact in his city because he unleashed Jesus' love every day, everybody, everywhere.
Last question. Where do you see Northeast 10 years from now?
Loving the Ville, man. We have only just begun this movement. Like, we are already investing millions of dollars and thousands of hours into our city every single year in hopes that we can see the kingdom of God flourish. God's kingdom come and His will be done in Louisville as it is in heaven. But this whole movement's only 5 years old. 5 years. Just think about what kind of terror we will be when we are teenagers, right? So, I mean, fast forward 10 years, we're 15 years old, man, we'll be running to town, man. But no, I hope that all of the substantive ministry and relationships that we're building will only just mature, and we're making exponentially more of an impact then, and changing lives in exponentially more of a significant way than we are right now.
Tyler, I just want to say I appreciate you being here today. I know we're about out of time, but I want to thank you for coming to the show. I know we had scheduled to be here before, but something came up, but I'm happy that you're here today. I will say this, without a question, without a doubt, I believe that Northeast is better because you're here, and I'm proud to be a part of this church. We had a discussion once before, and you asked, why did I stay? I'm proud to tell people that you're my minister, you're my pastor, because you walk the walk, you talk the talk, but you walk the walk, and you make Northeast what it is today through your leadership and the things that you do. If we have time another time, maybe I'll talk to you about me being an